So things like spreading sunscreen on toast and then using that to tell whether or not a sunscreen is good or not. For whatever reason, this goes really viral. A lot of people seem to believe it's a good test. But what it's really testing is how wet the sunscreen is, because water is amazing at absorbing heat. So yeah, if you have like a moisturizer, it's going to do exactly the same thing.
Welcome back to Unpacking Beauty. I'm Kelly Driscoll, the creator and host, and I'm a skincare enthusiast on YouTube. In my years of reviewing products, I've come across a lot of questions that I myself just can't answer. And that's why I created Unpacking Beauty, so I can take mine and your burning questions to the experts. Today, I'm welcoming Michelle Wong, PhD. She is a chemist, a science educator, also known on the internet spaces as Lab Muffin Beauty Science. And Michelle is doing the hard work of busting myths and misinformation on social media. I got the opportunity to pick her brain about all the trends that I'm seeing on TikTok that I know for sure are pissing her off. I know she has something to say about these trends. I'm talking about spreading sunscreen on a piece of bread and toasting it to test the effectiveness and the protection of sunscreen. I'm talking about the misinformation and the fear mongering about ingredients like sulfates in hair care and parabens in our beauty products. And I'm also asking her about UV cameras. I'm seeing this all over TikTok and Instagram, people using footage from UV cameras to prove all sorts of things about sunscreen protection and comparing different products and their levels of protecting our skin from UV. And, spoiler alert, it's not all that it appears to be. So I am so excited to have Michelle Wong, Lab Muffin Beauty Science, and I am so thrilled to ask her what TikTok trends are pissing you off lately. Michelle Wong, welcome to Unpacking Beauty. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat.
I am excited to chat with you because the question today is what social media or, TikTok trends, what TikTok trends really, annoy you as a chemist? Because there's so much misinformation spreading around. I mean, it is the internet, but I feel like with the advent of Instagram and now, of course, with TikTok, it is just spreading so much more in the beauty space. And, you can come across some really wild trends and misinformation around beauty, and you are out there, you are fighting the good fight. I want to thank you for your service to the community, because you are really just like debunking myths and misinformation and really just unpacking these kind of ridiculous trends that are happening on TikTok and on Instagram. So first of all, thank you for your service. But I would love to open up this conversation, really give you the space and the floor here to talk about the trends that are kind of on your mind right now, that are really kind of getting you fired up and kind of pissed off and getting you ready to respond. I would love to hear what's on your mind right now.
I think it's usually still the same big ones. So the first big one is clean beauty. I think we see a lot of TikTok videos where people are using scanning apps where they scan ingredients, and the app tells them, according to the ingredients, this is like, I don't know, a 50 out of 100 for toxicity.
Yeah.
And that simply doesn't work. So for anyone who's not really familiar with this, basically, you can't tell how effective or how toxic a product is just from the ingredients list. It doesn't have enough information to let you make that assessment, because the dose makes the poison. So something that's used at 0.5% in, let's say, a shampoo is very different from an ingredient that's used at, let's say, 50% in something that you leave on your skin or something that you inhale. So yeah, these apps just take a very black and white view. If it's in there, then it's toxic. If it's not, then it isn't. And the problem is they draw a very arbitrary line. Every ingredient is toxic at some concentration, and the ones that they tend to say are toxic are usually the ones that they usually just have scarier sounding names, or they might have more data on them because they've been more researched. The next annoying trend, which I know a lot of chemists are really annoyed about, is people trying to test their products in weird ways. So things like spreading sunscreen on toast and then using that to tell whether or not a sunscreen is good or not, which is absolutely ridiculous if you understand what's going on with toasters. So the reason that um, toast goes brown is something called the Maillard reaction. It is pretty much just proteins reacting with sugar under heat. Sunscreens do not like when we tan, it has nothing to do with sugars reacting with proteins. It's because the UV is triggering our melanocytes to produce more melanin. So it's like testing completely different things, but because both are brown, people assume it works.
Hmm.
And for whatever reason, this goes really viral. A lot of people seem to believe it's a good test. But what it's really testing is how wet the sunscreen is because water is amazing at absorbing heat.
Hmm.
So, yeah, if you have like a moisturizer, it's going to do exactly the same thing. But yeah, there's no end of these tests. There's like people using pH strips in very weird ways. They're testing things that you can't test with a pH strip. There are people testing things on oranges. Putting things on brown paper. And disappointingly, CNN has a channel that pretty much just does these ridiculous tests, and it does very well. And yeah, like you would think you could trust a source like CNN to not do completely ridiculous clickbaity
Yeah.
stuff, but we have that.
So they're falling into the like 1 minute crafts or 5 minute crafts trend, right? Of like just like bringing you in with these really weird images. Yeah, I have seen that the toast thing was something I think it is. I knew your answer was going to be as simple as like your face is not bread. But I wanted to hear you talk about that because that's the one I've been seeing for years, but it never seems to die. Yeah, testing out skincare products on not skin. The one that I see a lot too is they will like slice an apple in half and then use like a vitamin C or just something that they claim has antioxidants in it. And then they're like, well, this side has the product and this side doesn't. And see how this side didn't brown, it didn't oxidize. Therefore, this skincare product has, mucho antioxidants or something. And I'm like, but it's exactly what you said. It's like our skin is not these inanimate objects. The processes that would affect an apple, that would affect bread, are not the same as how it would affect skin. But there's something about it that really draws you in, that gets your attention. And I think it is unfortunately very effective. And that's why we're seeing what maybe used to be reputable sources like CNN using these types of tactics, I think, really, right, to draw you in. This is also something, this reminds me a lot of a conversation that we had last year on my other podcast, The Journey, where we talked about beauty myths and marketing. And we talked about sunscreen. We talked about mineral sunscreen, chemical sunscreen, benzene in sunscreen. And one of the things that I really learned from you from that conversation was that oftentimes the science around skincare and everything it's very nuanced. It's very complex. There's a lot of different steps. And sometimes it's easier to latch on to the more simpler explanations that come with myths and misinformation, or something as easy as a demonstration of putting sunscreen on toast and saying, therefore, that's how it protects you from your skin tanning or burning. Those things just make sense. And so it's easy for us to engage with that and understand that and take it on. And it's a lot harder for us to engage with the science of how skin works, right? And how sunscreen works. And so I think that is a big reason why these types of tactics in these like very short formats, right? I mean, TikTok is like under a minute trying to get your attention. I think that's why they work so effectively, which I think is why it's kind of unsettling when you think about it that way.
I think also it does kind of speak to something in us where, or maybe it's just a failing of the beauty industry where the claims are like the marketing and the claims are sometimes so wild that you feel like you can't trust any of that. And so you have to go back to something like a test where there's a black and white answer, like, does it protect my toast?
Right.
But one of the things about sunscreen, actually, it's weird that sunscreen keeps getting tested because sunscreen is actually designed to have a very, very easy standardized way of comparing, which is the SPF label.
Right.
And I think people just don't trust that it's as simple as that. Like the SPF is the best test we have.
It's like we want it to be simple, but then we have to complicate it at the same time.
Yeah, it's like we can't quite trust that it's that simple, and we also can't quite trust that it's that complex. Yeah, it's really our minds playing a lot of tricks on us.
For sure. And I think Sunscreen is, I mean, the one that gets the most, I think, misinformation spread around through social media, especially. And there could be all kinds of reasons for that. I think we've hit on some of them. I think there's even more out there. I think it would be really interesting to. This is a little bit off topic, but I have seen where they talk about some of the misinformation around like wellness and clean beauty and yeah, sunscreen and health products and things like that, and how that can sometimes be a pipeline into more like conspiracy theory type things, because a lot of the ways that we get drawn into those can start to kind of put us into that rabbit hole, and getting into that type of thinking, which again, unsettling stuff here. I mean, yes, it's super fun to unpack these trends and misinformation and debunk them. But I think it is, like I said, I think this is actually really important work that we should be really examining these further than just the 15 seconds or the 1 minute TikTok that we are, looking at quickly on our phone when we're just taking a break. There's one that I'm seeing a lot, and I find them so sketchy. It's the UV cameras. I am seeing this everywhere, and they're very like they pull me in because like it's very interesting. It seems like everybody and their mama has a UV camera now, and so it's so easy to use these. But like, yeah, I'm seeing influencers using them. I'm seeing dermfluencers using them. I would love to hear your take on if these UV cameras are actually this powerful. Can they actually measure how sunscreen is protecting our skin? If it's actually meeting the labeled protection? And I'd also love to hear, because spoiler, I have an idea that it probably can't do as much as we're saying it can. I would love to hear your take, I guess, on how these cameras can be misused and how these images can be misused to perpetuate misinformation or myths.
So the way that UV cameras work is the ones that you have on that most people have, which are like these little USB things, which I have one as well. They're really fun, but they are quite limited in what they can show you. So the first reason is all the little ones all work using UVA. We know that sunscreen, or most of us hopefully know that sunscreen is mostly about UVB protection. That's what the SPF mostly measures. There is also some UVA protection, but these cameras operate on a very narrow, select number of wavelengths of UVA. So it's not showing the whole spectrum of protection. The other thing about these cameras is that they're kind of very sensitive to particular things. So certain things will show up as darker on the image, and some things will show up as lighter. So one example is with mineral sunscreens. So in case anyone isn't familiar, the way that mineral versus chemical sunscreens work, they both mostly absorb UV and convert it to heat, about 95% of that for mineral sunscreens, close to 100 for most chemical sunscreens. And then about 5 to 10% gets reflected for the mineral sunscreen. Now, the reflection for a mineral sunscreen is mostly in the UVA region. So that means that what the UV camera sees for a mineral sunscreen is that it looks kind of gray and lighter than a chemical sunscreen, even if they're the same SPF, because of that small amount of reflection. So you can already see like a tiny thing, like that tiny 5% makes a massive difference in the image.
Hmm.
Another thing I've discovered about UV cameras from my own tests is that even if you have a very small amount of SPF, like probably below 10, you can still see it showing up as extremely dark on a UV camera.
Yeah.
So I did this test using weight, which is the way that SPF works. So SPF is tested using 2 milligrams per square centimeter of skin, and studies have found that most sunscreens, the SPF will change linearly with the amount you apply. So if you apply half, you'll get about half the SPF. So, but even if you apply 1/5 of an SPF 50 sunscreen, it looks exactly the same as if you apply the full amount. So yeah, the darkness doesn't really tell you that much. And a lot of people are using SPF cameras or UV cameras to try to test if their sunscreen has enough SPF. And yeah, even if it's giving only 1/5, it will look the same. I've seen people showing like, oh, you actually only need a tiny amount of this sunscreen because it shows up completely dark when I put it on my face. And it's like, No, you're kind of tricking yourself. You are probably exposing yourself to more UV than you think you
Mm.
are. You're being misled by the camera. Now, most UV camera companies are very upfront about this, and they say, like, this is not meant to be a replacement, but because it gives such compelling footage, I think a lot of people get sucked in.
Yeah.
So the things that you can see with the camera, pretty much the best way of using the camera is just looking for missed spots.
Hmm.
Um, we all miss a lot of spots when we apply sunscreen, and I think that's a really interesting experiment. So just like put on your sunscreen normally and then look at what bits you've missed with your UV camera. It will be bits you weren't expecting. So when I was using a sunscreen stick, it turns out I was missing like a giant stripe down my nose, which I was not expecting. I was thinking maybe like, eyelids, which I was also missing. I was missing like spots here and here.
Mm.
Um, and also around my nose, which kind of makes sense because it's hard to get in there,
Yeah.
but literally a giant stripe down the middle of my nose. So that's super interesting. Another thing is looking at the difference between like 0 and 10 SPF, I guess. So I was doing a bunch of washing experiments where I was looking at whether or not I was getting all the sunscreen off my skin. The answer is pretty much no. You can never get all the sunscreen off your skin because it does tend to sink into the top layers of your
Oh,
skin.
wow.
And unless you literally like buff the top layers off, then you're not going to get all of it off. And that is completely fine. But yeah, you can see if you've removed like most of the sunscreen.
And that's it. That's all it can measure.
Pretty much, yeah. So you can't
Wow.
compare between two different sunscreens. You can only compare the same sunscreen, and you can only compare pretty much between like if you've got zero to 10 versus 10 to 50 ish.
Wow. So, okay. So, if we're coming across anything using a UV camera that is saying this sunscreen is not like protective, this sunscreen, says it's SPF 50, but it's not showing up on the camera at all. This must be, fake. This must be a sunscreen
Mhm.
scandal. We should just like filter that out.
Actually, one thing that you could possibly test is whether or not the sunscreen works at all. Like
Ah,
if it doesn't show up at all, then that is probably a red flag that it's not protecting against UV at all. Like again, it's kind of like zero, like you can see if it's 0 or 10 to 50. Yeah, so that would be a red flag. I would probably want more evidence.
mhm.
So there are other tests you can do. So you can use like the sunscreen on paper and then use a UV light and see if that shows up. And if both of those don't show up, then I would have a lot of doubts about that sunscreen.
Okay.
Sunscreen, I guess.
Yeah, it's probably not a sunscreen then. All right, that's interesting because, yeah, I see the cameras being used to compare products for sure. That sounds like that's a no-no. Seeing it a lot to say something is, super protective or not super protective. Sounds like there's a gray area there that's not going to be, and just that alone is not going to be enough to give us the evidence we need to make those conclusions about sunscreen. But it is like you made a good point. It's very compelling footage. It does draw you in. Now, sunscreen, I think, is probably, we've done a whole episode about sunscreen already. As I mentioned, we're going to keep talking a little bit more. I am seeing a lot of people kind of panicky, a little bit anxious about should we be wearing sunscreen at nighttime? Should we be wearing sunscreen if we're working from home? We're not going outside. The windows are far away or the blinds are drawn or whatnot, but I'm in front of my computer and I've heard about this blue light stuff. Is that going to be aging my skin? Is that going to be damaging my skin? Should I be wearing sunscreen in that instance? Should I be wearing sunscreen to go to bed? I mean, sunscreen is definitely picking up in popularity. People are absolutely saying wear it every single day. Yay. But I don't know, this whole wearing it at nighttime, wearing it in front of your screens, that seems extreme. So I would love to hear your take on if we should be wearing sunscreen 24/7.
I completely agree. That is pretty extreme. So one thing that is quite interesting is that the US seems to have a stance on sunscreen that's different from the rest of the world. In the rest of the world, so this is from the World Health Organization, from Australian authorities, from Canadian, from UK, pretty much the advice everywhere else is you only need to wear sunscreen if the UV index is 3 or over. So
Yeah.
obviously this is completely just for skin cancer prevention. It doesn't tell you anything about skin aging, but you can already see like there is a difference. I think the US stance is very much wear sunscreen all the time, as much as you can slather it on.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that already is one really big difference, which not many people know about. Now, for the aging part, then obviously, I think if you're using anti aging actives and you're not wearing sunscreen when you go outdoors, then that is definitely going to probably set your skin back a bit. You are probably trying to undo stuff that you like, undo impacts on your skin that you could have avoided by wearing more
Mm.
sunscreen, kind of wasting your products a bit.
Yeah.
Now, for indoors and screens, this is where it gets a bit more shades of grey. So, first off, with indoors, if you're standing in the middle of a really sunny field, the UV you're getting on your face, about 40% of that is coming from the sun directly shining on you, and the rest of it is the sunlight bouncing off the sky onto your skin. So, that's about 60%. So, yeah, the direct sunlight shining on you is not all that you're worried
Mm.
about. Now, with how much is bouncing off the sky, you can pretend you're sitting inside like a hemisphere, like a half ball of sky. That's 100% of that 60%. Sorry, there's a lot of percentages, which might get confusing, but I'll get that. So that's like the 60% is coming from that sky. If you block out half the sky, like let's say you're standing right next to a building,
Mm.
and so you can only see half the sky, then you're only getting about half of that 60%. So you're getting 30%. You've blocked out 30% just by blocking out the sky. So how that translates to indoors is if you think about you're sitting indoors. So I'm next to, well, I'm about 2 meters, which is 6 feet-ish, I think, from a window. Um, and that window is really covered in trees. I've got like maybe like I can see like this much sky.
Okay.
So if you think about how big that is compared to like the rest of the dome, that's like, I don't know, less than 1/100th of the whole dome. So I'm only getting like less than 1/100th of that 60%. Plus, I'm not getting sun directly on me.
Mm.
So that means I'm left with like just by sitting in this room, I have about like SPF, I don't know, 300 or something. Um, so yeah, whether or not that's enough, of course, depends on your skin. But for most people, that is not going to be an amount of UV to be concerned about.
Right.
Now, if you're closer to the window, then that fraction of sky will get bigger because you're moving towards
Mm-hmm.
it. Long story short, for most people, if you're far away from a window, so if you're more than, let's say, 3 meters from a window and there's no direct light shining on you, you probably don't need sunscreen.
Mm.
If you're right next to a window or if there's sun directly shining on you, I would probably recommend wearing sunscreen. If you're in a car, that's probably the worst, like, kind of inside scenario you have because you have windows everywhere, the light moves around, it sometimes shines on you, it sometimes doesn't. Highly recommend wearing sunscreen in the car. Plus, you have to go from the car to your house.
Right.
So yeah, indoors though, if you're like buried in the middle of an office and there's like you can see a tiny bit of window, probably not necessary.
Hmm.
Now screens. So screens do not produce UV, and sunscreens don't protect against visible light or blue light. Um, Tinted products do though, so tinted sunscreens, tinted foundations, concealers, they do.
Hmm.
So yeah, screens, you are only concerned about blue light. Now the amount of blue light from a screen is really tiny. Even if the screen is really bright, you are really unlikely to get enough blue light to make a big difference unless you're like right in front of the screen, like your eyes are almost touching the screen. Um, where there are some studies which have found some effects of blue light on skin cells, but usually these lights are like huge fluorescent lights that are like 10 centimeters away from the cells. I haven't seen anything that is all that concerning about screens and artificial blue light. Now, if your skin is darker, so usually they say Fitzpatrick 4 or darker, then it is possible that the blue light from the sun might make your pigment darker.
Hmm.
It still doesn't look like there's much in terms of aging. There are some beauty companies that are saying they have evidence that it does cause that, but again, it's usually all just like cells that they're looking at. I'm willing to change my mind on this, but at the moment, I just don't think there's strong enough evidence for everyone to be worried about blue light from screens. Definitely not from screens, maybe from the sun. So yeah, if you have
Okay.
darker skin and you're worried about pigment, maybe wear a tinted product when you're outside. So foundation or tinted sunscreen. Sorry, that was extremely long.
No, it was like fascinating though, because it's like, I think it, especially for when we're sitting inside, right? I think that's the biggest one that I see a lot of people having a lot of anxiety over. And I think knowing some of those percentages, knowing how some of that works and how we can reduce our exposure just by being further away, I think can give a lot of peace of mind of like, do I really need to be putting this sunscreen on? I mean, if it makes you feel good, just do it. But if it's like stressing you out, or if you're going through products super fast and it's like your skincare budget can't keep up with the amount of sunscreen you're going through and you're just sitting inside, if that's stressing you out, I think that, like hopefully you take comfort in this information to empower yourself to say like, you know what, I think I don't need to wear this because I don't really want to, and it sounds like, I'm gonna be good. I do see a lot of people misusing that study of the man who was a like a long distance trucker for like 25 or 30 years, and it was the one side of his face where he was closer to the window on the driver's side was a lot more wrinkled, and he had lost a lot of firmness and elasticity, and the other side was a little bit more youthful in comparison. And I see a lot of people using that study, like I said, misusing that study as a reason why we should be wearing sunscreen. But I think you've kind of already covered the fact that if you're in the car, you're exposed on more sides. Your dome is not as protected, right? When we're in a car
Yeah.
with multiple window situations. Whereas like you and I, we
Mm.
have windows far, far away in our rooms. And
Yeah,
so we
I
don't have
think
to worry about it.
yeah, I think another way of looking at that photo is actually like there is a huge difference between the two sides, and he's like the two sides are only, I don't know, 6 inches apart. Um, and both of them
Yeah.
are indoors and both are getting almost the same amount of sun. So really that that study doesn't really show you the importance of indoor sunscreen full stop. It shows you the importance of indoor sunscreen when there's direct light hitting your skin, because that's the real difference between the two
Wow.
sides, right? Like
Yeah.
one of them is facing the window, the other is facing away. And I think, yeah, one of the big things you can do if you're working from home, for example, or if you have some flexibility in your office, is literally just turn your desk away from this window, and that makes a massive difference.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to say, I moved last year, but my apartment before I sat right underneath a window all day long. And one side of my hand and arm got darker than the other one. As I didn't wear sunscreen because I'm like, I'm fine, I'm inside. And one hand started to pick up more pigment because I was right under the window and it was just on that side. And I had a nice clear view of the sky. And now I sit much further away from the windows. And it actually does make a huge difference. So it's really empowering though to know that those small changes that we can do can actually in the long run really help us out with our skincare goals and with our sunscreen usage. And that information empowers us so that we're not stuck slathering sunscreen on our faces every morning, every night, every 2 hours, and when we really probably don't need to. So yes, I think that that's great. Thank you for sharing all of that, like giving us some peace of mind. I would love to switch over to hair care. This is an area I don't know that much about, but it's something that you touch on quite a bit in your content. But one thing I always hear about, especially like shampoos, is sulfates. Some people say you absolutely have to have sulfates in your hair cleansing products because it's really the only effective way to get a clean scalp and really break through like all the buildup that we can get on our hair. But then there's a whole other camp that says like you absolutely should not be using sulfates because they're extremely drying. They really strip your hair. They're going to damage your hair. So I would really love to hear, what are sulfates? What's the deal here? Should we be avoiding them in our hair care? Or as I'm guessing, it's probably a little bit more nuanced than that.
It is more nuanced than that, and it is like, so I think most people, honestly, including me, like we go into hair thinking like it has to be more simple than skin, right? Hair is dead, skin is alive. Hair has to be more simple, and it is not. It is so much more complicated than skin, to be honest.
Wow.
um yeah, and there's so many reasons why, which I won't go into, but yeah, it is much more complex. And one of the big reasons is because when you have a product like shampoo, actually this applies to cleansers as well.
Okay.
um when it's working on top of your skin and not working inside your skin, it's actually a bit more complex. It's much more formula dependent because the whole formula is sitting on top of your skin or hair. Whereas if you have a skincare product, like the formula sitting on your skin, that will change how much the active ingredient will go in. But
Mhm.
once it's past your skin, it is almost entirely about the active ingredient.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it's a bit more complex. So back to sulfates. So sulfates usually refers to two particular cleansing surfactants, which are the active cleaning ingredients. They're the things that lift oil off your skin or hair, and they are sodium lauryl sulfate (SLS) and sodium laureth sulfate (SLES). And these two are rumored to be harsher than other surfactants. So this is where you get sulfate-free shampoos from. They're meant to be better for not stripping your hair from oils or hair dye if you have colored hair, or stripping your skin or irritating your scalp or whatever. So there's, yeah, a whole bunch of things about these two ingredients. Now, a lot of this info comes from tests where these surfactants were used on their own. So there are things like SLS is actually used in patch testing as an irritant. So you can see, you can compare how irritating other ingredients are, or you can see how well a particular ingredient protects against irritation. But again, this is SLS on its own. The thing about cleansers is that the way they work is very coordinated. All the surfactants inside a particular product will arrange into something called a micelle, and it's like basically a ball that's covered in pins. Um, if all the pins were the same, if they were all sulfates, then and you're comparing that with a sulfate-free product with exactly the same concentration, everything else the same, then yes, the sulfate product will probably be harsher than the non-sulfate product, or maybe we'll say SLS specifically will be harsher than the alternative surfactant. But that's not the real case. In reality, almost all modern cleansers and shampoos will have at least three different surfactants. So you've got
Hmm.
different colored pins. And the way they interact with your hair is very coordinated. It's not going to be just the sodium lauryl sulfate. It'll be the other surfactants that are helping the sodium lauryl sulfate stay out of your skin so it gets less irritated. The other ones will change how it cleanses as well. So you can actually get an SLS shampoo that is less stripping, less irritating, also maybe less cleansing, like less effective than something without SLS. Now, with SLES, this is a completely different ingredient. I mean, it's not completely different, but what it basically has is a bunch of ethoxylate groups, which are these little oxygen based groups stuck in the head. Basically, that makes the head of the pin much bigger, and that completely changes how it interacts with skin. One way is you can think about it as it's a lot bigger, so it's not going to get in as much. It's not going to irritate your skin as much because it literally can't get into your skin. Same thing with cleaning, it just can't get into the hair as much, so it's not going to
Hmm.
strip oil as much. Again, on its own, if we change concentration and we change what else it's with, that's going to change again. So, one really interesting study was done by Good Housekeeping. They actually looked at cleaning different samples of hair that was dyed with different shampoos, and they actually found that the one that stripped hair the least was a sulfate containing shampoo. It was compared with sulfate free shampoos on the market, and yeah, that just completely debunks the idea that sulfates are always going to strip more.
Wow. That is like, it's so interesting too, because the same thing with skincare, I'll always say, like, you can't cherry pick the ingredients. Like, I mean, I do it because like I'm not a chemist. So I use what I know, right? I look at the ingredients list and I go, I know what this does. I know what this does. I know what this is. I think I know what these do together. But it's so much more than just saying these ingredients are bad, these ingredients are good. It's about how everything plays together, and I think that that is fascinating, but I think it's also frustrating. Like if you're not into science, if you're not looking to get your PhD in chemistry anytime soon, it can be kind of frustrating. Just be like, what's going to be a good product? Um, but I don't think that like demonizing specific ingredients is really the way to go when we're navigating our beauty products, and yeah, not wanting to waste our time, our money, our face, our skin, our hair, right? I think that yeah, there's probably more to it. It just can't be as easy as saying don't use these ingredients. Um, That's the one thing I think about with trends, that I think it just makes people, it turns people off to certain ingredients when there's obviously um, so much more to know about it. It just isn't as simple as this ingredient is bad, this ingredient good. It's about the formulation. And unfortunately, we don't always know. And I mean, even I'm sure as a chemist, when you look at an ingredients list, you don't always fully know exactly how something is going to work, because in practice, is going to be different. Um, so maybe that's something we can take comfort in. It's like sometimes you look at ingredients list and you're like, I don't know how this is going to work.
Honestly, all chemists are like that. Like none of like you just can't tell just from looking at an ingredients list, and no chemist will just completely judge an ingredient or sorry, completely judge a formula or dismiss a product just based on the ingredients list.
Yeah.
Or no chemist should. I should say there's always in every specialty there are always people who will not quite apply the learnings they've had from their
Mm.
education, but yeah. Um, I don't know any cosmetic chemist I've talked to whose opinion I would trust, who would only look at the ingredients list. All of us are like, I would have to try the ingredient. I would have to try the product. I
Yeah.
would have to look at their clinical testing. But at the same time, I think maybe we do tend to get very annoyed about ingredient list over analysis because everyone does it.
Yeah.
But yeah, what we really mean is you have to look at the whole picture, and
Yeah.
ingredient list analysis is only one part of that picture. Um, yeah, one thing that's really useful that I think is super underrated is just looking at reviews.
Yeah.
I think people should really look at reviews more. And that's one of the things I love about your channel. I'm always looking at your reviews because you have like similar skin concerns to me and you review so many products and I trust your opinion.
Oh,
I
thank you.
think, yeah, having that is really useful. Just knowing
Yeah.
like a bunch of influencers who you trust, who have similar skin concerns to you, and then looking at their reviews. And if all of them say one product is really working for them, then that product is probably going to be a good bet for you. You'll have a higher hit rate with that product than any other product.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even when I'm making reviews, I'm looking at other reviews too, because I've learned through my journey doing this that exactly that. I can look at the ingredients list, I can cherry pick what I'm seeing, and I can get an idea of what might be happening here, but I have through my experience, I've opened up my mind so much to things that maybe, an earlier version of me would have been like, nah, I'm not going to try this, because things do surprise you. Products, by the ingredients list alone, they don't even have necessarily the textures or the qualities that maybe the ingredients list is making you think that it has. You really got to get your hands on the product. You got to try it out. But I'm always reading reviews too, because, you know, other people's experiences can kind of really help tell more of the picture, really fill that in. And this is kind of off topic slightly, but one of my favorite things to do is read the negative reviews. I don't read the 5-star reviews. I like to look at the 2-star reviews, because I want to see where the complaints are at too with the product. And a lot of times it's just, it didn't ship to them in time. Like, that's not about the product, but oftentimes there's some really legitimate concerns to look out for too when I'm researching a product and really getting into it. So I mean, it can seem as simple as saying these ingredients are great and that's why I recommend it, but it actually is so much more than that. And it's the same, if you're going to analyze something a little bit more scientifically, it's the exact same thing. You have to take everything into consideration, which, yeah, we try our best, right? But we do. I mean, the internet is amazing. We have so many resources at our fingertips that it doesn't have to be that hard anymore. Now, one hard question, nice transition. One hard question that I have for you. It's a great way to end this conversation. Parabens. Let's talk about parabens, because I feel like this was the skincare beauty panic of the 2010s. I feel like I remember people really freaking out about parabens, especially in skincare. And then we definitely had, we still have it, but we have a huge trend of not using any type of preservatives in our beauty products, which I literally just saw a picture on one of the Reddit subreddits of somebody being like, is this mold? My makeup primer or something, and everybody's like, yeah, that brand doesn't use preservatives, it's no good. We definitely see mold, so that's no good. But parabens, demonized. They get a lot of fear mongering. A lot of people are getting the word that these are unsafe ingredients to be using in our beauty products. So yeah, big, bold question, but I would love to hear your take on parabens. Like, what's the final word here? Do we really need to be worried about these ingredients?
Okay. Um, so parabens, like you said, were one of the first ingredients demonized by like natural beauty, I think, before it became clean beauty when it got rebranded in the 2010s. Um, so parabens are preservatives. They are super common, and the reason they were super common before everyone started demonizing them and brands started taking them out because of marketing, like market demand. The reason they were so popular is because they were really good. And by good, I mean they worked really well. They worked against a lot of different microbes that end up in products. They work at a really low concentration, so they're very potent preservatives. They're really good at, yeah, you don't have to add very much. And that is good because, I mean, it does save money, which is always nice. But more importantly, it means that people who have irritation or allergy problems with that preservative, if you have a lower concentration, generally the chance of that is going to be lower.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so they were really good. Not many people were allergic to them as well, which completely depends on the structure of the preservative. But parabens were just super non-allergenic, really good, really like they just worked for a broad range of products and a broad range of people. And that is probably why they became so demonized, because people kept
Mhm.
seeing words like ethyl paraben, methyl paraben, and they were like, well, this is a somewhat complex word. I wonder what it's doing to me. That doesn't sound very natural. Yeah, one of so that's one of the reasons. Another reason why they became demonized, I think, is because just because they were so common, there were a lot of studies on them. And this is a good thing. Having lots of studies on something, testing it against lots of different, testing it for lots of possible safety problems is literally how cosmetic safety works. Like, the more popular something is, the more funding there's going to be for looking out for potential problems because so much of the population is exposed to them. But what that also means is that there is a huge number of studies where they found small effects from parabens on things like cell lines. Whereas if you have a really unpopular preservative, then no one's going to study it. There'll be like 3 studies. Um, Unfortunately, how clean beauty apps work is that they don't really look at this nuance. They go, there were 100 studies on parabens, there were 3 studies on this preservative. That must mean parabens are more dangerous.
Hmm.
So, because of that, parabens have become really demonized, and people like lots of brands who, I mean, I think some people do this out of good intentions, like they genuinely believe that parabens are unsafe, but there's also a lot of brands that just wanted to look for some sort of differentiating factor that they could use in their marketing.
Yep.
And so they just started pushing, well, all of these products, even though they work better than my product, even though they cost less than my product, they're going to kill you. Um, and unfortunately, that is a very good marketing tactic, and it worked really well. And more brands started doing that. So yeah, there's a mix of honest and dishonest actors, I think. But because of that, parabens became really demonized.
Hmm.
Now, parabens, as used in the vast majority of products, are safe. Um, they have been tested so much that we know a lot about how much we need to kill microbes, and we know how much is probably going to have some sort of toxic effect. And so everyone recommends, like all the ingredient manufacturers recommend the percentages you use to make sure that's not going to happen. In the EU, they actually have a list of preservatives and how much you're allowed to use of each one. And that is, again, based on really rigorous safety assessments. And because there's so much data on parabens, we are a lot more certain about that percentage than for like the hypothetical preservative with 3 studies. Yeah, so we know a lot more about their long-term effects. Plus, because they've been used for so long, I think they were introduced in the 1920s. They became really popular probably, I want to say the 1960s. I'm not
Wow.
100% sure of that, but it is like a lot longer than most other preservatives. Um, so we also have like long-term population studies essentially, like I guess your grandma has been using parabens for 70, 80 years and she's still alive.
Right.
So we have that real world sort of proof as well, which is not the case with a lot of other preservatives. So, yeah, the alternative to parabens are, like you said, no preservatives, which means that you end up with mold. And a lot of people aren't scared of that. And the reason is because preservatives were so good. Um,
Yeah.
if you have unpreserved products, there are lots of examples in the literature where people have used like poorly preserved products on people who were immunocompromised, on babies, when nurses have used it for hand washing in a hospital, and that's contaminated and caused really bad problems for a lot of patients. And we're talking things like losing an eye. There
Yeah.
have even
Yeah.
been baby deaths, not to freak everyone out too much, but like this is a possibility when you have too many microbes. So yeah, not having preservatives is not a good option. It is definitely worse. And it's a bit like vaccines. I think it's like a lot of people talk about how vaccines are a victim of their own success because we've forgotten how terrible things like polio are.
Right.
Same with preservatives. The other option is obviously alternative preservatives, and hopefully, I've gotten across the idea that alternative preservatives, maybe they're safer, but maybe they're also more dangerous. Like, we just do not know, and we just don't have that certainty of data. And honestly, it looks like parabens are a much safer option. One particular preservative that got much more common as as parabens were getting phased out is methyl isothiazolinone, which is the short name is MI. Um, this got more popular, and it turns out this is super allergenic. Like people become
Oh,
sensitized to it. I think the estimate is something about maybe 5 or 10% of the population is actually allergic to them. Whereas parabens, the allergenicity is so much lower. Like very few people have paraben allergies. So many people have allergies to MI. I'm one of
wow.
those people. Um, yeah, and yeah, it's just one of those examples where using an less tested alternative has ended up being much worse.
Yeah, that it's really interesting to hear people, yeah, demonize parabens, but it sounds like the alternative is actually what they're demonizing about parabens is actually coming true in these alternative ingredients is we're getting, the microbe growth, which, yeah, I think you're right that we don't take that seriously because we don't have in our lifetime, we don't know how bad that can actually be. It can be bad. Um, but also, I mean, like I've had, products that use like the natural preservatives in them, especially a lot of K beauty brands got super into that. I think they're pulling back from it now, but they were really into it like 2018-ish, 2016, 2018, around that time. They've got like to be a big selling point. And those products will grow mold. And okay, so maybe you're not afraid of mold. Mold's natural. Maybe it's not, causing infection or irritation on your skin, but like you just wasted your money. If I can't hit you with the facts and the science, let me hit you in your wallet. You're wasting money with these products that you're not going to be able to get to the bottom of before they go bad on you. Whereas if you're using more proven preservatives like parabens, the shelf life of that is going to be much more extended. I think that's been my experience with those natural preservatives. They just cannot keep up past like six
Yeah.
to 9 months.
Yeah, I think there are alternative preservatives that will still work. I think, yeah, they are getting developed. And I think, unfortunately, I don't think parabens are really going to make much of a comeback
Hmm.
just because they've been demonized so much. But yeah, I've definitely experienced that as well with K beauty products.
Yeah. I feel like parabens need like a PR makeover. Like we need to change the name and come out debut a new and improved paraben like you've never seen before. Thank you so much for sharing all of your information. I always feel like I get a little bit smarter when I talk to you. And I mean, this podcast is all about answering our burning questions about beauty. I think you have answered quite a few of them today. So I want to thank you so much for sharing your expertise and, like I said, fighting the good fight and really helping to combat a lot of the misinformation that is spreading around beauty communities. So I would love it if you could share where we can find you on the glorious internet, where we can connect with you and learn more from you.
So I'm Lab Muffin Beauty Science on pretty much every platform. I'm on YouTube, I'm on Instagram. I'm also kind of on TikTok. I feel too old for TikTok. Um, my videos are also now on Nebula. I recently joined Nebula, which is like a video streaming platform that's for more like educational, edutainment creators, which is
Nice.
pretty exciting. Yeah, so yeah, see me on everything and send me questions. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Kelly. Always love your work.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, thank you again. This was fantastic, and I'd love to have you back in the future. So I really hope you enjoyed that conversation with Michelle Wong, Lab Muffin Beauty Science, talking about all the social media trends that really piss off chemists. And if you did enjoy the conversation, please share it with your community. It would be so helpful if you would share it. And if you have some time, please, wherever you're listening to this, you can rate it with stars on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you have a few more minutes, I would be so honored if you would just write a really quick review, just a few sentences on Apple Podcasts about how you're enjoying the show. Especially for a new show like this, reviews so help to support the show and help other listeners find it. And if you have a question about the beauty space you'd like to have unpacked in the upcoming episodes, let me know. If you're watching on YouTube, you can drop it right in the comments. If you're on Spotify, answer the Q&A with your burning question. Thank you so much for being with me today, and I'll talk to you in the next episode coming out in 2 weeks. Talk to you soon.